Each of the following movie moments all gave fans no choice but to bring an end to their time spent supporting everything from cinematic universes to petrol-fueled epics. Hi, I'm Gareth here from Whatculture.com, and here are the 10 exact moments you gave up on these movie franchises. Number 10, The Fridge Is Nuked, Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The first 3 Indiana Jones epics aren't exactly short on frankly ridiculous moments of action. But it didn't matter whether he was sprinting across trains or attempting to keep from being squished by a giant boulder. These thrilling moments always felt somewhat grounded in reality, and fans understandably hoped for more of the glorious same heading into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Then it happened. During the closing stages of yet another pulsating opening indie stretch, the titular archaeologist is forced to think on his feet as an atomic bomb test is about to begin. Whereas just about any other soul would have likely been wiped out by this blast, Jones somehow managed to survive by climbing inside of a fridge. It was in that utterly absurd moment many fans realised the version of the franchise they once adored was perhaps lost forever. And with the latest flick not exactly smashing it at the box office, it appears there's still a decent amount of folks out there who simply aren't in the mood to buckle up for another whip-cracking adventure post-nuking of the fridge and the subsequent alien quest that was Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Now, with that in mind, what is your favourite action set piece? I want to know, so let me know in the comments section right down below. Number 9, Cars in Space, Fast and Furious 9. Much of the charm that made the Fast franchise such a compelling watch soon burned away when the film started to bring in the real big bucks. And it was during Fast 9 in particular when many likely decided enough was enough, and it was finally time to turn down the barbecue invite. What was once pitched as a joke soon turned into a silly reality, as Fast regulars Tej and Roman hopped into a rocket car and finally made the jump to space. In storyline, said ridiculous moment was necessary in order to take out a satellite as part of the overall mission. But in reality, this was simply a case of the minds behind the Fast series trying to outdo themselves when it comes to petrol-powered insanity. They achieved that at least. It's just a shame that doing so resulted in many feeling the series had finally lost sight of what initially brought folks to the balmy action-packed ride to begin with. That being edge-of-your-seat road set pieces, and a focus on the importance of family, not CGI space shenanigans. Number 8, Tony Stark's death feels like the natural end, Avengers Endgame. The sight of Tony Stark paying the ultimate price as Earth's mightiest heroes finally took down the big bad mad titan was about as beautiful and perfect an ending as any MCU fan could have asked for. And that was sort of the problem. Witnessing the Infinity Saga finally being brought to its staggering end felt like a natural conclusion to the entire sprawling franchise as a whole. Disney and Marvel Studios were never going to pass up the opportunity to try and replicate that lucrative process going forward, of course. And it wasn't long before the MCU was chucking out multiple new flicks and even branching out onto the small screen in subsequent phases. A lot of the folks who once couldn't get enough of Tony Stark and their gang have now found themselves struggling to keep up with the many new superhero tales being told on multiple platforms, however. The likes of Spider-Man No Way Home and Black Panther Wakanda Forever can still definitely be classed as financial and critical successes, sure. But that still doesn't change the fact that many have struggled to stay plugged into the ever-growing franchise in the time since that truly superb Endgame. Number 7, Martha, Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. While some weren't exactly happy about living in a world where Superman snapped necks to save the universe, Man of Steel was still successful enough to kick off a full-blown DCEU. But in the space of just one sequel, much of the buzz surrounding Warner Bros.' answer to the MCU evaporated, as Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice turned out to be a bit of a mess. Ben Affleck in bitter Bruce Wayne mode was surprisingly refreshing, Gal Gadot was a delight in her debut as Wonder Woman, and Henry Cavill was simply born to play Kal-El. All this cannot be denied. However, all their best efforts still couldn't change the fact they were throwing down in a movie that boasted such iconic moments as Wayne roaring, "Why did you say that name?" in response to Soups asking him to save Martha. Rather than punching the air at the sight of the legends battering one another before becoming allies, the two lads oddly bonding over their mother's shared names was cringy enough to leave many saving themselves from the burgeoning and largely hit-and-miss DCEU there and then. Number 6, Locust, Jurassic World Dominion. Human clone Maisie Lockwood decided to shockingly free a bunch of dinosaurs after bizarrely deciding this planet-changing move was the right call because they're alive, like me. But it was that hilariously cringy Fallen Kingdom moment that also set the stage for the Jurassic movie fans had long been hoping for. One where dinosaurs finally roam free in our world. Just think of the possibilities. It was frustratingly clear early on though, that the epic finale to the Jurassic series was more concerned with another living being causing havoc outside of a park or enclosure than the prehistoric beasties you turned up to see. Admittedly, that first moment of locust mayhem was genuinely quite horrifying. But the minute it became evident during the film's opening stretch that these biosync-created menaces were going to be the unwanted focus of much of the action our returning heroes would be thrown into the middle of, and not the dinos on the poster, was the exact moment even die-hard fans of the series were happy this Jurassic World was coming to an end. Number 5. John Connor is terminated. Terminator Dark Fate. Terminator Dark Fate felt like it had all the makings of a long-awaited return to form for a franchise that looked like it had been very much terminated after a few disappointing entries. All that excitement and hope of Dark Fate recapturing the glory of those initial 2 Terminator outings was blasted to smithereens with a shotgun in about a minute flat though. Many will always have a soft spot for Edward Furlong's young John Connor after his captivating work in Judgment Day. So to see him be unexpectedly gunned down by a machine from the future so early into this attempt to revive a once-adored franchise was enough to turn many off the flick from the get-go. Even with just about every sequel post-Judgment Day being rather unremarkable when compared to Cameron's hits, fans were still prepared to give the series one last chance coming into Dark Fate. Losing John so early on undermined many of the cherished events that went down in those classic first 2 features though. And it was this controversial call that likely terminated many fans' hopes of ever seeing another great Terminator flick once and for all. Number 4. Logan's end is too emotional to follow. Logan. Similarly to Avengers Endgame's emotionally charged final moments, James Mangold's Logan felt like the sort of entirely moving end to a series and franchise that just didn't need to be followed. It was always going to be, of course, because the likes of New Mutants and Dark Phoenix were very much in the works around the time of its release. But that still didn't change the fact that many would have likely been just fine with Mangold's masterpiece sitting as the final ever Fox X-Men tale, finally allowing Hugh Jackman the chance to really explore what an R-rated Logan would look and feel like. The film's affecting final moments were as impactful as any of the impalings that came before it. Rather than being a triumphant last hurrah for both Jackman and the series as a whole though, those aforementioned other X-flicks soon came and hugely disappointed. But in all honesty, most had checked out of the franchise the second Logan died with his heart in his hands. Number 3. Newton Hicks don't survive the opening. Aliens 3. Rebecca Newt Jordan and Dwayne Hicks quickly became 2 characters synonymous with all things alien on the back of their unforgettable appearances in James Cameron's 1986 Xenomorph sequel. And that's what made the decision to have both of these iconic aliens figures fail to survive the next film's opening stretch such a controversial one when Alien 3 finally hatched in 1992. Cameron himself even went as far as to note that the sudden killing of Newt and Hicks was a slap in the face to the fans, with the 2 perishing after their ship ultimately crashed on Fiorina 161. Having all of Ellen Ripley's thrown together space family be unceremoniously dispatched was the sort of dumb call that instantly left a bad taste in the mouths of those who wholeheartedly adored the flick that came before David Fincher's largely hated threequel. And most would happily admit that they largely fell out of love with this once near perfect sci-fi franchise the second those 2 beloved personalities were shockingly eliminated. Number 2. That Smaug anticlimax, The Hobbit Battle of the Five Armies. Trying to squeeze 3 massive films out of a relatively short story was always going to be a tall order. But Peter Jackson was seemingly up for the challenge, and went about crafting 3 big ol' Hobbit movies, with the first 2 building towards the moment Thorin, Bilbo and the rest of the gang came face to face with the terrifying Smaug. And while the long-awaited appearance of Benedict Cumberbatch's mighty dragon did not disappoint, the same could not be said for the follow-up to the desolation of Smaug's big cliffhanger. With Smaug heading towards Lake Town with the intentions of turning the place into his own personal bonfire, fans were fully expecting this entire set piece to be up there as one of the most spectacular big screen sequences in Lord of the Rings history. Instead of a thrilling battle that stretched across a decent chunk of the flick though, the big bad our heroes had been on a collision course with from minute 1 was shot out of the sky in 10 minutes flat. And that was that. It's hard to sit through the rest of the 144-minute Battle of the Five Armies runtime without feeling somewhat deflated after the series' marquee villain is impaled by an arrow in such rapid fashion. And many fans understandably struggle to remain invested in the never-ending CGI fest of a battle that followed, with most unfortunately realizing in the immediate aftermath of Smaug's inevitable demise that a Hobbit trilogy was perhaps a journey too far for even Jackson. Number 1, somehow Palpatine returns, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. Within the Rise of Skywalker's opening sequence, just about everything intriguing set up in The Last Jedi was thrown right down a reactor shaft. Somehow returning despite seemingly dying in Return of the Jedi, the Emperor went about letting Ren know early on that he'd actually been pulling the strings from afar all along. And it was said return from the grave that also set the stage for Rey's bold and nobody revelation in Episode 8 to be undone too. Even before Luke and Leia's apprentice was revealed to be a full-blown Palpatine though, the mere presence of the Dark Lord of the Sith in Episode 9 was too ridiculous a pill to swallow for even the most accepting Star Wars lover. Thankfully, the likes of The Mandalorian and Andor would come along to revitalize the franchise in the years that followed this all-round mess. But for some, the damage was already done, and Palpatine somehow returning was the moment they decided to take an indefinite break from the galaxy far, far away.